this session where we will be talking about the key elements of actionable reporting. Today with you, I'm Mark from SuperBi, and I'm a BI consultant here. For those not familiar with SuperBi, we focus on data visualization for business, specializing in advanced Excel and Power BI visuals for financial reporting. However, the visuals themselves follow best practices of data visualization and have been in wide adoption in other areas as well. So a quick agenda for today's session. We'll be having a quick introduction to IBCS, which stands for International Business Communication Standards. And these are the highest standards for business data visualization, actually originating in Switzerland. Then we'll go into the key elements of actionable reporting, where we will go back and forth with some Power BI examples and how we can achieve those in Power BI directly. And at the end, we have, I believe, 15 or 20 minutes dedicated for the Q&A session as well. So let's first try to understand the concept of actionable reporting. And nowadays we collect and store a lot of business data. But as we do so, we encounter the challenge of presenting it, understanding it, and making the right decisions faster. So at SuperBi, we identified three main pillars to actionable reporting. And those are the driving of smarter decisions, and you will be able to take them by focusing on meaningful insights and not just see what happened, but also why, when, and what are we going to do next. The second pillar is clarity. And by following the IBCS standards, you will achieve clarity and consistency across the whole organization. Sounds like a simple thing to do, but doing it manually is actually quite hard. And the best thing here is that the standards are incorporated in the visuals themselves. So the last pillar would be ease of use, and it refers more to the technical side, creating reports in a simple and better way, as well as for the business side by driving and improving the so-called data culture, while requiring minimum DEX skills. So let's talk a bit about information design and the inspiration behind IBCS. So the idea here is the consistent data representation, as we've seen in other areas such as maps, for instance, because of the use of colors and north, east, west, and south are, of course, standardized in place. The notation of the roads and different elements on the maps is always standardized, so we can, of course, read the maps efficiently. Next would be an example of traffic signs, because the traffic signs use pretty much global standardization of shapes, colors, and the meanings behind those. You can, of course, navigate in traffic efficiently and easy. And the best, let's say, example of a pattern recognition would be in music sheets, because as the standards have been in place for quite a long time now, musicians can now play from Mozart to Bach to modern music using the same style and notation, and the need for identifying and legends of this becomes redundant. And now the musicians can, of course, read the music through patterns instead of reading individual notes. But what about in business, right? There is no consistency and no clarity and no agreed upon patterns. Because if you just Google sales dashboard or financial dashboard, KPI dashboard even, you'll get all sorts of different software systems, data representation, legends, ideas on how to present the data. And the solution for this is actually a accepted and well-established pattern, which is called the IBCS standards. So International Business Communication Standards that handle all areas of data visualization. In this particular regard, I would like to just point out the, let's say, most common ones. So how to represent messages, titles, how to show time and structure, how to represent different time periods, which charts to use in what case, of course, how to label efficiently, not to use too many labels, not to use too little, and where to place those labels, of course. And when we're dealing with recognizing the patterns, we actually want to keep the consistent representation. And what I mean by this is, if we are showing actual data or forecast data or planned data or previous period data, we want to immediately be able to recognize them through pattern recognitions. And this is one of the key elements of those standards. And in performance reporting, highlighting the variance is really, really important, as you know that the majority of the action is actually happening there. Before last, the scaling should be a really big topic in considering business data visualization, as if you do not scale consistently across the entire dashboard, you can quickly get a skewed view of your performance. And lastly, of course, you want to be able to highlight the most important parts of your dashboards and the biggest changes and outliers and so on. So if we take a look at an example of a report that does not live up to the standards, but is a typical sales dashboard done in Power BI, you can see that, yes, we start with some, let's say, let me just move to a different pointer. You do start with, of course, your time representations, and then you have some slicers at the top. Then you have your sales numbers. We can see that we are 1.9 million in sales. We are profitable, and we have some quantities here. And then, of course, you have your breakdowns by different, let's say, states, time frames, subcategories, and so on. But any such dashboard should answer simple questions such as, is my sales performance good or bad? How good or how bad is it? Why is it so? And what are we going to do about it? And if we try to answer those questions, we quickly see that we have some obstacles here. Because, yes, we do see that we are profitable, but what about if our profit targets for this time period were, let's say, 300,000, or if the sales should be 20% higher? We simply do not get this information from a dashboard such as this. And then if, of course, we cannot determine if our sales performance is good or bad, how can we know how good or how bad is it? Then trying to understand those sales numbers by different breakdowns, for example, using a donut chart or a tree map or a structural axis combining with the line charts, can be really confusing and does not provide the needed information to understand why we achieved those numbers. One thing that is common and probably really well understood already, but it's still in use, is, of course, the donut charts, right? Visually, they can really be only compared when using maybe maximum up to 3 elements. And even then, a better visualization type would be just a simple column or bar chart, because we can easily compare the differences in heights or lengths. The next thing would be the tree map visualization that actually takes a large portion of this dashboard. And apart from the volume, and it doesn't even give us a lot of information. And then I'd like to point here the use of colors, right? Because we should really, really think about this, because in this particular case, we probably get our attention drawn to the yellow and the red colors here. But do they have any meaning behind this? Is it just for visual appeal purposes? Because then if you take a further analysis, and you'll see that in this particular case, at the top, you have the green color used for California. Here it's used for office machines, and it's used for sales and for furniture. So the analyst of this dashboard actually has no idea what the green color actually means. Then mixing axis and with time and structure in the same way can really be confusing. So usually we represent time in a horizontal way, and we understand it going from left to right, right? But if you mix this with structural elements, such as in this combo chart at the bottom, and especially when combining it with line charts, this can quickly give you a completely wrong idea of what is actually going on, because the correlation here indicated by the line is of course wrong. So if we cannot answer and the data and this is not helping us in assessing what we actually need, and those are the answers to those 4 questions, then we cannot of course plan the action. Let's take a look at a similar set of data, but done right in this case. So immediately you'll see that the questions here can be answered. So is my sales performance good or bad? Because we have this top level KPI that tells us exactly how good or how bad is it. At the top, you can see that we are actually 1.1 million below the plan. And how do we know it is bad? Because we are using a consistent representation for the colors, and the meaning behind the colors is standardized. So in this particular case, we have red for bad and green for good, and this is universally accepted. But if it's not, you can of course control those with your custom colors, even have colorblind support and so on. But because everything else, so the actual neutral colors are used for the data, you can quickly understand and get your attention focused on where the actual variances are happening, what is going on, what we need to understand from the dashboard. So when we try to answer the 3rd question and why, we can quickly see that from January to August, there is some up and down trends, but there is more red color than green. And this can be understood just from a quick glance, right? It's understood subconsciously. Also, with using this highly advanced waterfall chart, which is really good when we're trying to compare something from our targets, you can quickly again see the variances highlighted in that way. Then understanding why, again, because of the breakdown and because the visual here in the table is actually scaled, you can see the outliers in relation to the size, and we can understand, okay, why is this underperformance going on here? It is because of this women's category that is actually almost 700,000 below the plan. And then, of course, this might not be the entire context. We should maybe add a report page tooltip to create a further breakdown, or add a drill through page to understand everything there is to understand about this element and what is going on, what is causing the underperformance, and then we can, of course, plan the action. So in this next example, this is a really good example of trying to understand and compare different categories, right? Because we're using the small multiples functionality here, all those charts are set on the consistent scales, and you can visually compare the heights of this column to this column to this column, and also to the columns below. What this gives you the ability to do is you can quickly, just from a glance, understand the impact of your different categories, because everything is consistently scaled, right? The top categories impact your business much, much more, even though the relative changes are comparatively smaller. And just from a quick glance, you can see that just from the top 5 elements, only the home category is actually performing above the plan. In this next example, we can go over some additional elements, but of course we do start with your numbers, which could have some more additional information for, let's say, previous year plans, targets, forecasts, and so on. But using, let's say, a speedometer in this regard, what is the key information that such a visualization is trying to tell you? It is actually hidden in this small part. So this is actually the important information of such a visualization. Again, going back to the donut charts, it is much, much better to visualize those in columns or bars, because the height can be much, much better compared. Understanding the variance here, again, the most important part is actually the variance. So this is something that we should visualize, not the actually and try to highlight, not the actual height of the columns themselves. Understanding the different relations between a lot of categories in a line chart is something that is really, really hard to do, especially when we have multiple elements and trying to keep track of the colors and which element to the legend it corresponds to is something that we should also try to avoid in such regards. Again, we encounter this tree map visual that is usually used just for filtering the data, and this space, all this space could be much better used. Using the color codes for showing, let's say, the volumes and is also, let's say, problematic and can be, of course, done much better with using some other types of visualizations. So if we take the same data and again extrapolate into the actionable reporting way, you can see that it is much easier to understand. We see our breakdowns, we see that it is sorted, and we also see the contributions in the waterfall charts. We can see the outliers because everything is scaled properly. And again, using the small multiples instead of the tree maps and spaghetti charts is a much more efficient way to show your data. Now, in this next section, we will go over the key elements of actionable reporting and then see how we can quickly build them in Power BI. So the first element of actionable reporting is actually having the ability to use some advanced charts, such as segmented charts, waterfall charts, and so on, and the variance analysis. So at this point, I would like to jump into Power BI and see how we can really better understand if we compare it this way. So in Power BI, we start with a blank canvas and we'll just simply add in, let's say, our tables here to the canvas. So if we just click on it, we bring the tables here. And now we can, of course, populate it with the data. So we'll start with a structural breakdown. In this regard, the tables are most appropriate. And you can just populate it with your actual data. And even though this is a tables visual, you'll see that you get the column volumes sorted, right? And you can simply just click on the column to apply different sorting options. And this remains consistent for all the columns in the visual. You can also apply your custom sorting if the small arrow is removed. So now you can, of course, sort by, let's say, alphabetically or your custom sorting column in Power BI. But again, if you want to sort by volume, you can just simply click on the column. But the key information when trying to compare different elements is, of course, to add comparison measures. And for this, you have the placeholder buckets here that will automatically notate the values according to the standards. So if you just put in the previous year measures into the previous year bucket, you'll see that you get this column for the previous year, but you also get the automatic variances. And again, you can quickly just sort by those variances by just clicking on the column, right? And key here is, again, you want to have the responsive design just to keep the maximum amount of information that is available to the visual. Again, if we now add in additional measures, such as, let's say, plan or forecast, you'll see that you get those automatic variances on the fly. So, and also you will see that the notation gets applied, right? So now if we want to showcase those columns as well, we might as well just change the chart type and integrate it into the column. So you can access those settings in the column settings. You can drag and drop around all the columns. So maybe you want to focus on the plan comparisons. You can bring them to the forefront. You can also turn off or hide the columns that are unnecessary for, let's say, previous year. And now you can, of course, compare those measures. You can also switch into an overlap bar chart on the actual columns, and you will get the representation of the actuals and plan values and the previous year marker in one column as well. So now in this particular case, you might even not need those plan and forecast measures, and you can just simply hide those as well, right? If you want to add further highlight, you have the formatting options here to make the plans that we are interested in stand out even more. One additional thing is the ease of use that is necessary, right? So if you have multiple forecasts or multiple plans, you can even combine those, so you can have up to 3 plan measures and up to 3 forecasts. And of course, understanding those in relation can really help you have different scenarios to combine your outlooks and your annual plans and so on. But you also want to have this ability to limit the amount of, let's say, measures that is necessary, right, for maintenance purposes. And if with the visuals here, you can just simply go into the calculation type and just select any of the possible combinations between the comparison measures. So for example, if you want to compare your forecast to plan, you can simply switch this, and you'll see that the notation also changes, right? If you apply a plan in comparison to forecast, the notation automatically gets applied, and also the y-axis is settled. But moving back to the original state, so the comparison between the actuals and the forecast, we can create a really nice and detailed table as well, right? So if we just remove these measures for now, and we want to keep this, let's say, as a detailed table for our detailed page, we can just go into the attributes here and just create a hierarchy on the level, and you get this expandable hierarchy on the rows, which you can just expand by single clicking, or just go with the right click and collapsing or expanding the entire fields and so on. You can also add different, let's say, period calculations. So for example, if you want to combine monthly, year-to-date, and time intelligence functions, or even have calculation groups, you can just add those into the group placeholder. And then you'll create side by side the, let's say, the monthly data. If we just add a monthly slicers here, you can see this in action. So you can create those. We'll just add a month here and select, let's say, February, March. You'll see that we get those calculations side by side. And this can be really, really powerful also if you want to analyze different time frames. So for example, if you just add in your Q&A, I mean, your quarters into the group instead of the period calculations, you can just add the quarters and the months, and you'll get those columns generated for all those months. You can, of course, then expand and collapse the top level views, add subtotals, and so on. But in this particular case, if you just want to maybe, again, limit the amount of space and data that is used here, you can create a really detailed table in such way that is focused on variances. But you might not want to have those variances displayed at all times, and you can just simply switch the view with the chart slider and then create a completely separate view of the visuals. So for example, if you want to compare in this view your comparisons to previous year, you can just quickly turn the rest of the measures, hide them from the groups. You can hide them from single groups or from all the groups. And in this particular case, we want to focus on the previous year. We change the chart type, maybe even or sort it by that particular column. And we can, of course, now have 2 separate views. So we can have the comparison to plan and the comparison to previous year all in one visual. But maybe analyzing the, let's say, time frames in a table manner might not be the best possible solution. So for, let's say, for the starting pages and top level overviews, a better way would be to just complement this with the charts. And so we'll add in the SuperBi chart here as well. And the same logic applies here. So you basically start with a month and then you populate it with your actual data. And as you can see, the chart selected here is automatically defined by what is available. So with a single value, you'll start with this column chart. But if you add comparison measures, you will get a waterfall chart. And if you add more comparison measures, you will get additional information. So again, this is all responsive. So if I make it smaller, if I make it bigger, it will give us more information. You can also switch between different layouts. So for example, you have the options, again, with using the chart slider, you can switch between different chart options. So line charts, head and shoulders charts, waterfall charts, column charts, and so on. And again, this is all responsive. So with limited space, it will jump into the integrated variances. If you expand, you can, of course, control those variances at the top. You can also show a particular view in the layout. So if you want to just show the integrated variance regardless of the size, or just the variances, you can, of course, switch between those in both visuals. And now you can, of course, filter the data directly on the visual. And this, because the visuals are Power BI certified, they behave exactly as native visuals, and you can just quickly compare the both sets of visuals side by side. Additionally, if you combine, let's say, some time intelligence slicers at the top, you want to, of course, show your time trends regardless of the filtering. So instead of just keeping this filter operation, you can just go into the format pane, edit interactions, and of course turn this off. So now the slicer only filters the structure here. But going back to the presentation, this is okay. So we are showing the variances, we are showing them efficiently, and we also want to enable the small multiples, right? So how we can quickly enable those features in SuperBi? You can, by using, let's say, just the chart here, you can create multiple elements with just adding those business units, for example, into the group placeholder. And this is something that even native Power BI visuals now support, but there is one key feature here that really helps you with analyzing the different categories in comparison to one another. So the scaling here is of course applied, and the bottom elements, as you can see, don't really have much volume compared to the top level. And what you can simply do here is just go to the small multiple settings and turn on the top n plus others interaction. Now you can control the level of items that is displayed in this with the top 5 elements, and all the rest should be combined in this others field. And you can then increase and decrease this on the visual itself. So it is really highly interactive, even for the end users. You can, of course, highlight this to even stand out even more. And in this way, you can, of course, change a lot of and visually compare those categories, right? You can also change the label display just by clicking on it. So if you want to show both the absolute and relative variances, and also in this difference highlight element, which you can, again, control. You can also switch to different chart types. So again, just all in the same visual. And if you have, let's say, small multiples of the waterfall charts, you also maybe want to analyze the differences, even though that the volume is actually really big compared to the variances. But you can just simply click on the axis and you break it to analyze the differences, or you can just click on the titles of those small multiples to analyze them one by one. Additionally, going from the small multiples, you can also access the stack chart. So you have this icon at the top, and you can just quickly switch between the small multiples and the stack charts as well. One key element of the stack search. So usually stack charts are not the best visualization option, as you have, especially if you have many stacks, because it is really hard to compare, and then there's too many elements as well. But with this top n plus others functionality, it might be manageable. You can also, of course, change just by clicking on the label. You can change how the stacks are represented, so in absolute or relative terms. But the problem with the stack charts, regardless, is that having only the bottom element is actually aligned. So it is really not the best way to visually compare those different elements. You can also jump into area stack charts, but as I said, this is not the most appropriate way if we're trying to understand the differences. So yes, moving on. The next element would be the grouped tables with variances that we talked about. And because you can hide certain elements from just a single group, you can create a really detailed approach to this. And in this next example, we'll see this exactly in action. So what we have here is a, let's say, example of an executive summary dashboard. And we have, let's say, actual values from January to September, but then we have some plans and forecast values from then on, right? And in the, let's say, month-to-date and year-to-date view, you want to, of course, show the comparisons to plans if you hit your targets or not. But for the full year, because we do not have all the data, we wish to, of course, show the comparisons between the forecast and the plan. And we can still see that we are on track for the full year as well. And this can be simply just combined with just having all the comparison measures in the placeholder buckets. And then you simply just remove the unnecessary elements in that particular group, right? And in this particular way, you can just combine those elements and create a really understandable dashboard. So what we have here as well is some KPIs with the SuperBi cards that you can just quickly use to filter the rest of the data. And one thing that we also talked about, and we'll point out later, is also this segmented charts, right? So again, if you have your actual data present from January to September, but from then onwards, there's no actual data, the visual will automatically adjust into this segmented chart. Okay, the next two features, again, are the top and bottom end, which we saw in the charts, but it can be also applied to the tables, right? If you want to limit the data to the top elements, it is really important to show the rest of the data as well, as combined, it will, of course, impact your business as well. And using report page tooltips for driving additional insights and providing this on the fly can really be powerful in your storytelling. So if we go back to the original report here, you'll see that a really good idea is to start with a landing page that has, of course, those top level breakdowns. And again, you can see that the top and plus others feature is here applied. You can simply apply it by just right-clicking on the rows here in the categories, and then you can apply this on any of the different measures here. You can also combine this with comparison measures here or automatically adjusted variances. And you can also see both the bottom and top outliers. And this really comes into play when we try to analyze breakdowns, maybe in the tooltips. So you can start with the tooltips and have a breakdown of your comparison measures by, let's say, countries here. But showing all this in a really big tooltip would not be most appropriate. And we can just simply limit the amount of elements by going into the top plus bottom end functionality here. Say we want to only see the top and bottom 6 elements in comparison to plan. We limit this, and of course, if we then sort it correctly, we have this in the tooltip. And if we go back to the visualizations here, you can just simply enable this report page tooltip. We'll just turn up the interactions here. The report page tooltip in the tooltip, switch to the report page, and we'll get this tooltip. So if we now hover over the data, we can limit the amount of data displayed. One additional thing here is that usually the sales data or with different dashboards, we don't only show, let's say, good KPIs. We also show, let's say, costs. And in this particular case, we have the costs, and an increasing cost to previous year is, of course, a bad thing. So what we can simply do here is we just right-click on the row, invert the costs. So by default, they will be like this. If you invert them, it will be displayed as a bad thing. And again, if you now filter the costs, you can also invert groups into small multiples. So if you just right-click on the header of that small multiple group, you can now also show the costs in a right way. But this is really tricky when you're trying to do for, let's say, the tooltips. And again, if we just go to the tooltip page, we can simply mend this by adding that KPI breakdown into the group placeholder, navigating to the costs, and just simply inverting the costs in the tooltip. So in this particular case now, you can just, if you filter the revenues, we'll of course get the revenue breakdowns, but now if you filter for the costs, you will get the correct cost breakdown. So a decreasing cost is of course a good thing. One additional element of really good actionable reporting is also how to onboard your users. And by using help overlays with buttons and combinations of, let's say, GIFs and bookmarks, you can create a really good onboarding experience. So if we just have this overlay button here, if you click on it, you can integrate GIFs, animated GIFs, into those, let's say, instructional bookmarks, and just help those users understand the dashboard really well. In this particular case, we also have this drill through option. So if you want to understand in more detail, here you can just add a button for the drill through, or you just use the standard Power BI drill through options by just right-clicking on the row and expanding into this whole context of that particular group. And creating such a circular navigation pattern really enables you to understand the business in full. So, using this functionality in maybe just a sales environment or any sort of comparison can be, of course, good. But a really key element of actionable reporting in finance is, of course, showing also different financial statements. And for this, you can use, again, the same 2 or 3 visuals here. So you can just go into this next example, and we have a tables visual here that has a structure of your accounts and your actual values, again, compared to plan, but we are using a integrated waterfall chart type on the columns. And one thing that I forgot to mention is you can, of course, also rename the columns accordingly, just in the column titles. You can also set the names and in the legend of the charts, so you can, of course, keep that consistent across the entire organization or the report. And in this particular waterfall case chart, you see that the costs here are displayed as a positive number. So we want to show the visualization that this should actually be subtracted. And we can simply just do this by right-clicking on the cogs and inverting all the children. And now the waterfall jumps into place. It also, the comparison measures here are represented correctly. And then the next thing to do here in this P&L statement, it would be, of course, to tell the visual that the gross margin is actually the result of the above accounts, and we should just simply mark it as such by right-clicking, and now the waterfall chart makes complete sense. Then, additionally here, when we're talking about financial statements, we usually don't have, let's say, certain measures in the account structure. So if we go back and click on any of the categories here, you can just go to the add formula and write in your formula on the visual itself. And allowing your end users to have this, let's say, customization really helps you creating the reports and financial statements. So in this particular case, we'll just make it italic. We'll format it as % because we want to have it here. And maybe you can color code it by giving it a blue color, not of course red or green, because those are already have their determined cases. But if you are using a different color set, you can of course use it. And simply once you've done that, you can just click add, and you have added this additional element on the fly on the visual level. So it's not written back to the model, it is just calculated on the visual level. Additionally, when we have structured our visuals and so on, you usually want to have some sort of commentary with additional insights of why certain things have happened. And for this, you can use the commenting solution in all three visuals. So you have the comments here, placeholder, in the tables, in the charts, and in the cards as well. And you can just place the comments in those placeholders. And you'll see that the comments now appear as small markers that you can hover over, and the comment will be displayed. Right? But if you want to enable the comments, you can just go and turn on the comment box as well. And this is all sorts of a smart dynamic commentary solution. So you will see the comment titles are actually generated from the data. And below it, you have those different comments that you have stored in your Excel or SharePoint table, and it can be linked directly to the model. And now, because this is linked to the data ID and the account ID in the model, so we can quickly inspect that. So we basically have a star schema here, and then you add the comments as a separate table, and we are linking the comments to the account ID and to the data ID. And now we can filter by those two categories, of course. And if I now switch to a different time frame, you'll get the different comments. If you switch to a, let's say, balance sheet, you'll get the balance sheet comments and so on. If you switch to cash flow, we can combine all three financial statements in one visual, just like that. So adding this comments is a really important part, but also you want to make sure that you have this functionality, maybe enabling a write back functionality. So you can have Power Apps is actually there's a certified way of enabling write back functionality directly in Power BI. And you can then store and update your comments directly through the Power Apps interface in Power BI. So this also allows the users then to write in the comments there on the fly. Of course, you'd have to figure out the permissions for that, but that we also have an extended webinar where we explain step by step on how to implement this commenting solution with the write back functionality. One thing that you also want to keep in mind is having the ability to customize the visuals across your reports, right? And because the visuals allow saving all the settings of the visuals into the custom JSON theme, you can provide formatting across the entire report. And what I mean by this, you can of course assign your custom columns by the design here. So you have some different color predefined options, such as the Power BI color scheme, even color blind friendly modes for accessibility reasons. But you also have your custom colors that you can assign to different elements. And as we saw, the renaming of the columns and so on. And you can apply those different style functions by using a JSON theme, and all the settings of the visuals can be saved in such a way. So you can simply just go into the Power BI themes and browse for themes. So we'll go into this theme, and basically you can generate a JSON theme which has all the settings listed here. So you can quickly just switch those. So you have a simple JSON theme with all the settings listed. And once you apply this, let's see what happens. So you can have a completely dynamic customized for your brand design the visuals to allow this custom redesign for different states and different visuals and so on. You can also then go into more details with the last actionable element here that we'll be talking today, and this is the SuperBi cards. And this is, let's say, the last missing piece of this actionable reporting, right? You usually structure your data in tables, in charts, but for the KPIs, you usually use, let's say, one big card visual, and then maybe try to add some additional information. And we've also already seen what the SuperBi cards look in this executive dashboard, and this is just one visual that has multiple accounts separated by the group placeholder, and then we have some comparison measures, and you can use this to filter the rest of the dashboard, right? But you can also use the cards as your complete, let's say, overview of the business, or a business scorecard, right? And let's see how we can do this. So we have this one big value by just adding the SuperBi cards here and adding that value into the placeholder, right? But this is something that any card usually allows. But then you can add in those comparison measures, and you will get those comparison measures as well, and also an integrated chart here. You can turn this off if you'd like, but the key here is, if you structure your KPIs as a dimension, and we also provide all the information on how to do this, Enterprise DNA can also provide this, and you can just simply write in, place the KPIs into the group placeholder and generate multiple KPIs in one visual. So there's multiple cards, visuals in this particular case. You can also add trends to the category axis now and create integrated charts into each individual KPI. So because this is just one visual, it is astoundingly fast. So the performance is really good in comparison to each individual card being placed side by side. Additionally, as you saw, you can use the cards to just click on them, and then you filter the data. If you resize individual cards, the data will, of course, jump into different views. So if you give it less space, it will jump into one view. If you make it even smaller, it will jump into more view. You can customly rearrange those cards in any way that you like, and create a really nice overview of the business. You can also again, go into a focus mode of each individual chart. So for example, if you have some costs for per se, you can go into the focus mode. So there's 3 icons at the top of each card. And in this particular case, we'll go into the focus mode. You can also add in, let's say, the comments here as well. And the comments will be displayed in this focus mode. But in this particular case, we want to invert the cost. And for this, you just simply click on this invert button. You can also break the y-axis and so on. You can format the different symbols here. And once you're okay with that particular card, you can, of course, go back and you see it here. If this, let's say, integrated charts is too much to start with, you can, of course, use a, let's say, combined setting. So you can just go into the setting here and just write in suppress. And you have this option of suppressing the charts. So you can show or hide the charts regarding that setting. But you can also peg this to the bookmarks. So for example, if you have a button, you can just simply add a button for the users to show the charts, hide the charts, and so on. You can also use the visuals as a single card, of course, with just standard measures, but of course, this then limits the interactivity of the cards that you can do. Starting with a view like this also allows you to create that circular pattern of analyzing the business, right? Because you have those three icons at the top, and the last one is actually a drill through. So you can go into each individual card, and on click you can create a button for the drill through, or you can just access the drill through page from the settings of the card. And now you can analyze all there is to behind this, let's say, KPI, and you can just go back and have this circle interaction control of the cards. And there are multiple different, let's say, layouts that you can experiment with. One would be, let's say, starting with some high density and then just keeping the top level KPIs with the charts. You can also introduce trends by using different chart types. So you can switch between individual chart types on the visual itself. You can also control the global settings of the cards here to switch between different settings here, but because we have no comparison measures, these are maybe just the area charts here. You can of course use just the bands or big annoying numbers, but a better way would be just to add at least some visual integration to the cards to understand what is going on. One thing to keep in mind that we also pointed out that, and it's really important, is if you have two cards or two or more cards that should be scaled between each other to be able to visually compare, you have this second icon in the card, and which allows you to assign scale groups. So in this particular case, we've assigned a scale group. If it wasn't assigned, those two elements would of course scale the chart to the max. But if you simply just assign it to a same scale group, they can be visually compared then. You can, of course, assign different scale groups, limitless, and maybe just keep all the elements in one row on the same scale and so on. If this view does not suit the let's say, requirements, you can also jump into a different layout. So you have a few settings that you can use directly on the cards, but also all the settings are available in the global settings. And if you hover over at the top, you have this ability to switch into a different layout. And maybe this is not the best, let's say, allocation of the visuals, because we have some empty fields here, but you can switch between those two layouts. So the custom layout with the integrated charts and resizable sizing of the charts, and you can also jump into this row layout that has the spark lines behavior here. And again, you can, of course, switch between different chart types, but you can also, let's say, increase the height of those charts and so on. You can change between the different labels on the individual card level, on the global level. And if you have some, let's say, cumulative or let's say, elements that should show a balance, right? You can just simply click on that label and it will display only the last element or the balance of that particular chart. So it is a highly interactive way of how to structure your reports by starting with your most important KPIs, then bringing them down into more, let's say, specialized pages with charts and tables. And in that regard, you can have really actionable reports. So all those elements combined should give you the ability to structure your reports to make them more understandable, but most importantly, actionable. If you need additional resources on the visuals, you can follow these links from zebrabi.com. You will also find a knowledge base of documentation of all the features that we talked about today. Also, there are templates available that you can just populate with your data directly. And at this stage, I would like to invite you to actually the latest webinar that we will be hosting on March the 3rd, that will actually go into details on how to use, let's say, 3 different approaches on how to consolidate the data for the cards, right? Because the cards require the KPIs to be, let's say, structured in a particular way, but there's actually three different approaches to this, and we'll go into detail in that regard. Now, let's join. I'll try to answer all the questions in the Q&A section as we have some time left. But lastly, Enterprise DNA is actually giving away a free Enterprise DNA membership to the most engaged person in the Q&A. So hopefully we can have a lot of good discussions here. I see that the questions have been rising. There's a lot of discussion here. That is really good to see. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so let me just try to find that particular question here. Okay. Yes, yes, we can provide the Power BI files. All those templates that we've shown today are actually available, and we can provide them to you after the session. We can also. So what was the? Do you have to? Let's see if we can find the questions. Well, there was a really lot of engagement. This is really nice to see. Actually, it would really help if you had any questions. Can we just repeat them at this point? Depending on the KPI selected from a slicer. Yes, actually, there is a way. Right now, there's a slight limitation with that dynamic changing of the colors, because custom visuals do not have the conditional formatting fully supported. And in this regard, we cannot implement, let's say, a change of the titles directly into the dynamic formatting. We will have this ability in the future, as Microsoft has promised. But currently, the best way to approach this, let's say, dynamic switching is, for example, if you have KPIs that need to be represented differently, right? And you can simply just use the small multiples or the grouping feature in the, let's say, fields of the tables. So in this particular case, we just had the KPIs, we placed them in the group, and you can now invert that group. So by default, the costs will, of course, be like this. And if you have, let's say, a lot of such elements, you can just place that into the group placeholder and then define the particular KPIs that need to be inverted. And you can, of course, show them as such. An example would be here in this report. You have this, let's say, ability of, let's say, different accounts here, and of course the net revenue is a good thing, but maybe some of the if you had some bad KPIs, you would simply just invert those different KPIs in the small multiples or in let's say the groups of the tables. what would be our recommendation in regards to volume of data and how many years worth of data? Yes, this is something that's really common in let's say people who are used to Excel reporting and having all the data in the tables and then just scrolling down infinitely. But this is really something that is not best practice, right? Because how many elements can you really visually understand if you have, let's say, 10 to 15 rows of data? That is actually a lot already. And for this, of course, using the top M plus others functionality or introducing this circular design of the reports is a much better approach than just having, let's say, one page with of course you can add limitless hierarchies in the tables, but would this really be the best approach in visualizing it? We believe that it is not so. So limiting the amount of data on the rows displayed is really important when creating reports, right? Yes. So when we're handling the outliers, one thing that can be done here. So, for example, if you have really large relative variances that need to be, it's depending on, let's say, the previous year or planned data is really different from the actual values. You can just go into the settings of the visual, and you have some custom options here. So you can have custom outlier limits, and you can define those. So, for example, if you want to see the outliers, and like this, so you'd have the minimum and the bottom outliers, but let's say large relative variance shouldn't necessarily adjust according to the scale here. You can also turn on the large relative variances by just suppressing them. So you can determine, okay, all the let's say variances that go into the thousands and hundreds, you can just simply say, oh, turn those on or off. And in this particular case, you can simply just show them or hide them like this. You can also, with the let's say, data or table display, you can show them as going above or beyond that threshold in the data labels part. One other question was also how to integrate the drill through functionality on the cards. So the cards themselves offer this drill through functionality. So each individual card has a drill through button that can be used. So any page that was assigned or determined as a drill through page and has that particular KPI in the drill through filters can be then used, right? So if we have the cards here, you can go into that particular, let's say, card and just drill through, click on that page, and you'll get the detailed report. There was a question on how frequently do the visual change, and also if we get requests to customize these visuals. Okay, so the visuals are Power BI certified, and they're available to App Source. So the active license and the most recent version of the visual is always on App Source. And we usually have, let's say, 5 to 6 releases per year. And the process of releasing of custom visuals on App Source is actually fairly complicated because once you submit the visual, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks for the visual to actually become certified. In that particular regard, so once the visuals are certified to Power BI, to Microsoft. It will take 3 to 4 weeks for the certification process, and you will get a small marker. So for instance, if we have the cards here, right now, I believe the cards visuals. Oh, actually, the version of the cards has just been. So what I was trying to demonstrate it, once it's submitted to certification and it's approved, you'll get this more information icon at the top. And it usually takes then from let's say a week or 10 days that the visual appears in App Stores. But as we've just right now discovered, the latest version of the cards, which has been also certified, is available on App Stores. And you can just download it from the App Stores. And all the future updates will also be included in the license. So regarding this, if for, let's say, particular let's say cases you want to test out the visuals, you can also get the let's say private version of the visual to test out. But then of course some let's say companies don't have uncertified visuals allowed in their Power BI tenants, and in that particular case it won't work, of course. But you can add them to your organizational stores and so on. But you can get that private version of the visual. We usually tend to focus on let's say, the development according to a particular roadmap that is defined at the start of the years, and so on. But the request from customers usually affect that in prioritizing of what features need to be regarded next. But we do not develop, let's say, custom visuals for particular cases. We currently have 3 visuals included, and all 3 are included in this licensing package. So the SuperBi charts, the SuperBi tables, and the SuperBi cards that you can find on App Stores here. So you can simply just go into the App Stores, under App Stores visuals. If you write in the SuperBi visuals, you'll get all 3 visuals here. Is there any additional license cost associated for the visuals? All 3 visuals actually come with a free and paid version. So the basic version of the visuals has some of the limitations of let's say how many things you can pack in. So for example, the cards offer you the entire functionality, but you can only have up to 5 cards displayed at the same time. You can then in let's say the tables visual, I can bring up a quick comparison file that showcases the different versions of the free and paid visuals here. Yes, of course. It also comes with a trial license, so there's a 30-day period where you can test all the pro features as well in the visuals. But for the, let's say, licensing packages and pricings of the paid versions of the visuals, it's best to actually go to the pricing page. I'll just include the link in the chat. So if you just go, it's zebrabi.com and pricing zebrabi.com/pricing, and you should get all the 3 options and all the details on the different differences between the free, paid, and enterprise licenses of the visuals. The licensing package actually is is defined as a package of up to number of users, and this includes the creators and the viewers of the reports. So this should be counted in that particular number. But what you can see here is the free version of the visuals, and as you can see, if you limit to, let's say, just one comparison measure, you can of course move it around so to have different representations of the data, but this works as well. But it has certain limitations, right? It just maybe does not have all the charts unlocked. You cannot maybe, for the small multiples, you would just be allowed to have with one value, one chart types. For example, if I just throw in the business units here, you see, okay, this now works. But if I add a comparison measures for the small multiples, you would have to get a pro license. Same goes for the tables. Some of the features are locked, like the interactive controls, but you can still do a lot of let's say, really good visualization comparisons with the free version. And as I said, the cards actually have all the features unlocked up to 5 cards. Yes, we do have support. So if you have any questions regarding the let's say commercial questions, you can write to sales@zebrabi.com. In technical questions regarding the visuals, you can write to support@zebrabi.com, and we should answer those questions. Yes. Oh, one thing that I haven't covered, and this last question actually is a great one. So when controlling the interaction for the end users, of course, you want to be able to control what the end user can do. And for this, you have the interaction controls in the global settings. So all 3 visuals, actually the cards themselves currently have everything unlocked, but we'll be also adding the interaction controls for the cards, have this ability to turn on and off the interactions. So you can completely turn the interactions off, and the end users, once the report is published, won't be able to change the visual itself. They will just simply be able to interact with it with the cross filtering and so on. But if you want to enable certain elements but not others, you can just use the interaction controls to, let's say, prevent the end user from changing the chart, but they can use then the chart slider like this, or changing the variance calculations and so on. And the same can be done for the, let's say, charts. One additional thing in the charts for the interaction is, if you want to, say, publish the charts, but enable certain views, but not others, you can just use this icon at the top to click on it and just hide this from the published report. So let's say we don't need the line charts and the area charts, but we want to have the waterfall chart option and the column chart option. Now we keep those on, but the rest are turned off, and the interaction is now limited to those 2. Okay, I believe that this concludes the session. I will actually. We do have the comparison examples. Do you want? But are you referring to the Power BI files? So what I was showing you at before. So if we just turn this off and go back to this. So if you are referring to the comparison before and after, like this to this is the same data sample. So some of the templates are available on the web page, but I don't believe we actually have this before and after in a Power BI as a shareable file. But if you would want something like this, you could of course write to support@zebrabi.com, and I think we should be able to provide you with some of those examples. In any case, thank you for having me. This was a really nice and interactive session. Hopefully you found some new information, some additional ideas on how to make the reports actionable, and see you in the next session.